Welcome to the second part of my PTA series, which is going to culminate in a ranking of all of his filmography. Just after the release of his next film, One Battle After Another, I did the Boogie Nights video in like this video essay way that I thought was really fun to edit and was just kind of cool, but I got copyrighted for that and I don't really know why, so I just decided I'll go back to this format of me talking directly to the camera. I'll probably put in some footage of There Will Be Blood though, which is the movie I'm going to be talking about right now. This is PTA's 2007 classic. Stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Dano, other people, I'm sure, but those are really the only two main guys. And it centers around Daniel Plainview, Daniel Day-Lewis's character, who is an oil man. I wanted to approach this by talking about how great PTA is at making films that work well on a bunch of different levels, especially because the reviews of One Battle After Another have pointed to that being a strength of the film, that it is politically charged, that it is very relevant to like modern day America, but it's also an interesting family drama that's like exploring the things that are passed down by generations while also being like really funny and entertaining and a great action movie. And I think PTA is just really great at making these films that are fun to watch, but also very fun to dissect and explore in like a historical way and a thematic way. And There Will Be Blood is no exception. I'll start with how funny this movie is, which is something that I really didn't think about the first couple of times I watched it, largely because I was pretty young and I was maybe like a little bit pretentious. And I also just had heard that this film was very like important. And so I treated it as like this weighty, significant film that was very serious. And it is in some respects that. And if you are to analyze it as that, I would definitely not judge you for that. This is a very complex, dense, and serious, intense film. But at the same time, Daniel Plainview is like such a sociopath and is like such a narcissist that it is absurd and honestly comical. He seems like a cartoon character in certain instances in this film. And when I watched it with the crowd, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of laughing, a lot more laughing than I expected. And I honestly realized just how funny this movie is and how funny Daniel Day-Lewis is in this film. Obviously, the last scene is a great example of this. That whole exchange is like really, really good. Paul Dano and Daniel Day-Lewis have great chemistry in this film, specifically comedically. Like, Dano is so good at just being like this kind of pathetic, weaselly guy, and Daniel Day-Lewis is very good at just being this very obnoxious, brash asshole, and the way that those things clash is just really funny. Anderson is really great at finding humor in spots where it normally wouldn't exist in another filmmaker's version of this film. And so that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. But also there's obviously so much more going on here. Historically and thematically speaking, this is exploring greed, and specifically the way that like greed seeped into American culture and kind of superseded religion, which Christianity feels so ingrained into like the way that America was founded and formed and the way that the government was made and the way the Declaration of Independence was written. So like religion feels so central to America. And yet, obviously, you don't think of it that much when you think about America now, largely because it has been trumped by capitalism. And this film uses Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday as symbols of these two kinds of America, these two kinds of American dreams, the ideal American man, and shows that one of them is just like a jackhammer, a freight train that just like will not be stopped for better or for worse, and that the other one is inevitably going to succumb to the ways of the Plainview character. The moment where Plainview is literally like yelling, "I'm the third revelation," is him basically saying like, I'm the next thing, I'm like the next form that the ideal person will take, and I am taking over this sense of Christianity, and this new religion is going to be capitalism, is going to be greed, is going to be oil. Something I think you see within the opening section of this film, which I absolutely love. It reminds me quite a bit of 2001: Space Odyssey, in like the scene where they find the big rectangle thing I can't remember the name of, but when the monkeys find that thing and they're like, what is this? It's very similar to the way that oil shoots out of the ground in the first sequence of this film. And like everything is abandoned and everyone is like almost hypnotized, mesmerized by this oil because of the money that represents, that they just like move towards it, kind of like how the monkeys move towards the big rectangle thing. A shot that is like so unsubtle, I'm surprised I hadn't noticed it before, is a moment where the person that is taking care of HW as a kid literally just like leaves him crying so that he can go look at this oil, which is PTA literally saying like, these people care about this more than anything. oil just like symbolically, visually, as like this dark thing that corrupts the soul is brilliantly employed in this film. And specifically like the oil sequences where oil is shooting out of the ground look gorgeous, absolutely incredible. I think that the visuals are just remarkable throughout this film. The fire scene is one of the best sequences in PTA's entire filmography. But anyway, I'm kind of getting sidetracked here. The point I'm trying to make is this idea of There Will Be Blood as like an examination of America and what America became. And that being like this very weighty, dense, and kind of big thing. When you think about There Will Be Blood in that context, it feels kind of like an important and significant movie that is almost like too weighty to really be entertaining, but it's still an absolute blast, largely because the two performances here are spectacular. I'm surprised a lot of people don't talk about Paul Dano's performance nearly as much as they should. He is remarkable, and in really like his first big role, I guess, outside of Little Miss Sunshine, he is like holding his own against literally one of the greatest actors to ever live, delivering probably his best performance ever. He's picking his spots to just go wild. Like he goes crazy in certain instances in this film, specifically the baptism sequence, the I abandoned my child moment, which obviously has Day-Lewis just losing it and really going for it. But right next to him is Dano, who is like shrieking. This is another example of a scene being kind of funny. Like the part where Plainview is like, just get me out of here, I just want to leave, I think is really funny. Is like this guy who is like clearly so half-hearted about this and is clearly like half-assing his way through this quote-unquote baptism. The contrast between his indifference and Eli's like complete intensity and like being completely sold on this religion, I think is just really, really funny. But now I'll talk about it as a character study of like this narcissist. And the first scene I want to explore when talking about Daniel Plainview as a character is the one where he talks to his brother, or his supposed brother. I've always been a bit on the fence about this brother plotline because I feel like it could be cut out of the film, but also it is really interesting and also gives Daniel a character that he can like vent out his frustrations to. And then whenever he learns that that person has betrayed him, it almost like validates the fact that he shouldn't vent out his frustrations to everyone, that he should just bottle everything up. So I think it is pretty significant to Daniel as a character. It also is the reason that HW gets sent to boarding school, which is like, oh my God, that shot of him walking away from the train as HW is like trying to call out for him is like pretty emotionally devastating. But anyway, I'm getting all over the place. The point here is Daniel Plainview as a character is like one of the best in the entire 21st century, in my opinion, largely because Daniel Day-Lewis is unbelievable in this film, but also because it's just such a well-written character. Like I mentioned before, he has this cartoonish simplicity. Like, I just care about oil and I just care about money, and I'll stomp on any competition that gets in my way. But there's also a lot of depth to him in terms of why he's doing this. And the fact that the film never really explains why it makes him even more compelling. Because as a viewer, you have to figure out exactly why this greed has seeped into his life so much. He's somewhat sympathetic in a way, and you feel bad for him because he seems to be trying to find happiness in a way that is like never going to work out for him. And that's the other thing that's interesting about this idea of like capitalism trumping religion, is that neither Eli or Daniel are happy, especially by the end of this film. Obviously, Eli, spoiler alert, is dead. But at least Daniel has this like appearance of success, even if it is completely surface level. Him at the end of this film reminds me quite a bit of Charles Foster Kane at the end of Citizen Kane, this like incredibly wealthy man who has realized that his wealth is not really going to bring him the joy that he thought it would. This was a bit of a ramble, but the main point I want to make here is that this movie works as like this absurd comedy about this incredibly greedy man. It works as this exploration of America and American culture and the way that capitalism has seeped into it. It works as this character study of this narcissistic man who is going to ultimately find out that like money isn't going to bring him happiness. It works as an incredible visual spectacle, and also the score here, Johnny Greenwood is absolutely cooking, especially on that oil rig fire scene. There's like no complaints I have about this movie. I think it is an absolute 10 out of 10 classic. It is a masterpiece. It's one of the best movies of the entire 21st century, and when I do my PTA ranking, it is going to be very, very high, if not at the very top. Not to spoil that list, but like I mean, what else is it going to be? This movie is absolutely incredible. I wanted to briefly talk about the Oscars here, I guess. This movie lost Best Picture to No Country for Old Men, a choice that I'm sure at the time made sense. And even now, I think you could easily make the argument for No Country for Old Men. You could even make the argument for Zodiac, another very, very great film that came out in 2007. But I think There Will Be Blood just kind of stands a little bit above both of those films. It's shocking that Anderson hasn't really had like his Oscar night yet. And maybe we'll get that with One Battle After Another because it seems to be like a truly incredible film. But still, I find it highly unlikely that he'll ever one up himself with what he did with There Will Be Blood. So yeah, let me know how you feel about There Will Be Blood, how you feel about PTA as a filmmaker and all that in the comments. I'm going to be doing a PTA ranked in a couple of weeks. One Battle After Another comes out in about a week or so. I am very, very excited about that. And I will be doing a full-length review of that film whenever it comes out. So, yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want. I do movie reviews that are mainly just like me ranting about movies that I either like or really don't like. And that's really all I have to say about this one. So, definitely go watch There Will Be Blood if you haven't seen it yet. And yeah, bye-bye.